It's 7:30 AM, so time for another Monday morning Mullovers. Joining me, Carol Dogherty, in the studio is Richard Woof. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning.
Today we are mulling over the Oscars, which will be broadcast later next week. What I thought we'd do, Richard, is go through each category one by one and draw up a little list of who we'd like to see take a
Okay, cool. Best film, Nebraska. Best actor, Bruce Dern for Nebraska. Best actress, Kate Blanchett for Blue Jasmine. Supporting actor, Barkhad Abdi for Captain Phillips. Supporting actress, June Squibb for Nebraska. Best director, Alexander Payne for Nebraska. Best documentary, The Act of Killing. Best screenplay, Bob Nelson for Nebraska.
Right. What about visual effects?
Who gives a shit?
So what did you make of 12 Years a Slave?
Third favourite slave film after Django and Planet of the Apes.
Is Planet of the Apes technically a slave film?
Of course it bloody is. Just because the white man has been replaced by a chimp on a horse and the black man has been replaced with the white man doesn't mean it's not a slave film, Carol.
Right, well...
Just because it doesn't force its message down your throat like a battery chicken farmer pummeling reconstituted corn into a featherless swollen testicle doesn't mean it's not a slave film, Carol.
Are you alright?
I'm fine.
So, did you like 12 Years a Slave?
It was fine.
Good.
I mean, it didn't have anything new in it. It didn't say anything differently or interestingly. It didn't try and tell a story from a unique perspective, and it didn't have any emotional wiggle.
Emotional wiggle?
Emotional wiggle. Call me old-fashioned, Carol, but I believe that the test of a good story is one that makes you feel more than one emotion. One that wiggles, if you will, from fear to hope to humour to hatred. Not one that starts and stays at ugh.
Ugh.
It was all ugh. It had no shades of grey, although there were a lot of people in bondage.
Richard.
Sorry.
Well, I for one thought it was a masterpiece.
You were told it was a masterpiece.
Are you saying I can't think for myself?
Where did we go for dinner last night, Carol?
What?
Where?
Ribaldi's.
Ribaldi's. And whose idea was that? Dick Woof's.
So, are you saying that everyone except you is a sheep and only Dick Woof can tell if something is good?
No, there's a few of us. A few who have trained our minds to obey our hearts. As Funkadelic once said, free your mind and your ass will follow.
So, what you and Mark Commode are saying that...
If Mark Commode was freeing his mind, he'd find it up his... following his if he followed his he'd end up in it. His ass.
Right.
Up it. Up his ass.
Right, he's up his own ass. I think that's what you're trying
to
say. Yeah.
Miles up it.
Yeah.
Just like Alex Turner.
Alex Turner is miles up Mark Commode's ass.
Invoice me for your hair, Alex.
So if we could move on to what that we...
Now you've got it stuck up Marky's mardy bum.
If we could just talk about something...
Actually, they have got exactly the same hair. Mark Commode and Alex Turner. Like a sad father and son act where you can't tell who's copying who.
Richard.
Hope it's Mark. Sad bastard.
American Hustle.
What was their first album called?
What? Whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not.
Alex Turner is a legend.
Can I ask what you thought of some of the other nominees?
Shoot.
American Hustle. In some ways, a crime caper.
In every way, total garbage. Next.
Why do you think that?
Because I freed my mind! Here comes my ass!
Gravity.
A very pretty, badly written space kerfuffle that you could totally understand without sound turned on.
Right.
Like a palaver lamp.
Wolf of Wall Street?
Cool people can do horrible things, but it's cool because they're cool.
Cool. Captain Phillips?
The name's Bourne. Jason Gump.
Dallas Buyers Club.
I'd have loved to have been in the Hollywood Foreign Press Office when that one came in, because up until that moment they were all set on 2014 being a great year for slaves. But then suddenly, here comes AIDS. Oh, we've got a slave one and an AIDS one. Which one are we meant to care about most? Slaves or AIDS? Slaves or AIDS? Slaves or AIDS? Well, what about if, someone came along and said, the Coen Brothers film about that folk musician in New York, that was actually probably the best film.
Yes,
yeah, but the Best Film Award doesn't go to the best film, it goes to the most topical subject matter. And slaves, apparently, is the most topical subject matter. You know when would have been a controversial time to make a slave film?
When?
1866. Partly because that's when slavery was actually happening, and partly because cinema had yet to be invented.
So, what did you think of Dallas Buyers Club?
It was fine.
Okay, so that just about brings us to the break. We'll be back in a few minutes to discuss anything you listeners have sent in. Until then, here's Prince with Guess How Old I Am. Welcome back to Monday Morning Mullovers with me, Carol Dogherty, and Richard Woof. The the subject of the 2014 Oscars, which is broadcast next week, has got you all talking Tinseltown. Perry from Staffordshire writes, I love all this year's nominated best films, more than I have in years. Richard clearly has no real knowledge of cinema.
Actually, I have more knowledge of cinema than you'd expect, Perry from Staffordshire. I have actually been nominated for an Oscar myself.
No, you haven't.
Carol, I went to private school, and in our final year, those of us who took advanced media were invited to submit a short piece for our school Oscars. My film was a rip-roaring satire of the information age called Infinite Wisdom Volume 1. But it lost, controversially, to a Chinese girl who made a film about drug abuse. The whole thing was in monochrome, it had a cheap vignette effect and was set to Moby's Why Does My Heart Feel So Bad? But funnily enough, her name was Tacky.
Right. I got one from Helen in Suffolk, asking you to elaborate on your opinion that Cate Blanchett was the best actress. Cate Blanchett from Blue Jasmine.
Oh yeah. I've always been a huge fan of Cate Blanchett.
Yeah, she's great.
I mean, ever since I saw her in a little film called...
In what?
Yeah. For someone so young to have come from
Ireland?
Iceland...
Who are you thinking of,
Australia.
Richard? Yes.
Australia. And, you know, not obviously good looking. You know, she's quite a short brunette.
I think you might be
Ginger,
confused with someone else, Richard. Who are you thinking of?
Viggo Mortensen.
Richard, have you seen Blue Jasmine?
No.
Steve from St Albans said, I once saw Alex Turner in the pub. He was a knob. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Richard.
And crap music. Crap music.
Oh, well, actually, Rich, I don't think you can say that.
I think Kasabian are one of the worst bands who have ever come out of the UK. All his fault.
Kasabian.
Yeah.
It's Arctic Monkeys, really, isn't it, Richard?
Oh, I love them. I've got one from Greg in None of Your Business. Oh, I see. None of your business. Wow. You know what, Greg? You can just leave that blank. We don't really care where you're from. We're not Obama. You don't even have to use your real name. For all we know, you're called Twat.
Just read it, Richard.
Greg from Twatsville has written in, I agree with Richard. Oh, sorry. I agree with Richard. The Oscars has long since descended into corporate back-scratching that awards only revolutionary promotion and mediocre filmmaking. Nice. The only part of the whole show which I ever find moving at all is the in memoriam video. Yeah.
Well put.
Isn't it funny though that it's always the day after an actor dies that they become the best of their generation? It's like, oh, if they'd only held on one more day, then they'd have lived to see all these people say he was the best, but no. Cruelly, fate always picks the day before that sudden rise in popularity to overdose them on heroin because they aren't as successful as they will be when they're dead.
Yeah. I've got one from...
That was all sarcasm, by the way.
Yeah, I got it. I've got one from Celine in Wolverhampton saying, 12 years a slave
Masterpiece?
Masterpiece.
Really? Gosh, I wouldn't have thought of that, using that word, unless I'd seen any bus for the last 3 months.
Is a masterpiece which contrarians like Richard think is vogue to criticise.
I didn't criticise it, I said it was fine. Third favourite slave film, remember?
Or, damn it, with faint praise.
To even be included in the same list as Planet of the Apes is no faint praise at all.
A man who places the vile Django Unchained above this heartbreaking and soulful classic is obviously an idiot. I suspect this is a masculine coping mechanism, used by the kind of person who would rather their slavery was cartoonish and funny, in inverted commas, in order to stand it. An original visionary like Steve McQueen coming along and giving a brutal and honest account of the slave trade is clearly too hard to handle for a small-minded man. Richard?
The Somme, 1916.
Richard, we don't have time for
A million young men lost their lives. People of Britain, tell me, what made you more conscious of the impact of that day? Your history teacher giving a brutal and honest account of the facts? Or the final episode of Blackadder Goes Forth? Case closed.
Right. Thank you, Richard. And thank you to all who have listened and written in this morning. We hope you can join us.
If you can make a man laugh, and make a man cry, and make a man think, oh God, what have we done? Then you are probably a great artist.
Thanks.
If all you can make a man think is, oh God, I can see inside her back, you're probably not. Case closed.
Next week for another episode of Monday Morning Mullovers. I've been Carol Doherty, joined today
If Steve McQueen is such an original visionary, why did he nick his name from the guy who played Tanner in The Magnificent Seven? Case closed.
Richard Woof.